This is Ananda Devi, and today we're going to talk about the Enneagram Type 6, the loyalist. This one is a little bit more complicated than the ones I've done before, only because the subtypes differ so dramatically. So it can seem like we're almost talking about a different person or a different Enneagram type, but ultimately they're still a 6. The best way to describe 6s, firstly, they're called the loyalist, and that has a lot to do with authority. The 6s are the prototype of person and characteristic in all of us, that type of mentality that is basically feels their fear. It is an unsafe world. I need to protect myself in a very scary world. So they tend towards being very cynical, very logical, and can be very intellectual, depending on the subtype. 6s are live in fear. It really is the prototype in all of us that just has a tendency to feel anxiety and fear. This is something that 6s are very used to feeling because they feel it all the time. Remember, it's the thinking triad, thinking and planning. So they are always prone to thinking and planning and a contrarian type of thinking. They tend to doubt their own doubt. So often this can lead a 6 to be very indecisive and even philosophical. Because they are the most, I would say, ambivalent of all the types, depending again on the subtypes, and I'll get into that a little bit later. 6s tend to view the cup as half empty. They have to, their awakening is very much about recognizing that they are not their doubting mind. The word doubting mind really is indicative of what a 6 does. They doubt their own doubt, and they tend towards splitting and projecting. What 6s often do to defend themselves against this threatening world is they project their own feelings onto the outside world, often not owning what is inside them. And the splitting comes into it, where they kind of decide in a black and white thinking. Good and bad thinking, which always starts from a child. There's either good and there's bad. The 6s are very, very logical. And the social 6, for example, can be a kind of very intellectual, quiet type of person. Sometimes they can even be confused with a type 5 because they can also be aloof. But they are it's the lawyer's mentality when it comes to a social 6. They tend to view the world in that kind of way, where they can see very opposing points of views and logically sort it out and tend to doubt everything and everybody. The self-preservation 6, anyway, I'll start with the self-preservation 6. They are the warmest, usually, of all the subtypes. The issue with authority here is really about finding safety through authority. And they will do anything. They will be they kind of like the good girl and the good Boy Scout in order to feel protected by an authority. They will follow the rules. They need to feel that they belong that way. In other words, if I'm a good person and if I follow all these rules, then I'll be liked and loved. The social 6 is a little different in that way, in that they are the intellectuals. They are the ones that tend to really kind of like intellectualize and philosophize, and they can kind of think themselves in circles. In other words, they will think themselves into a conclusion, and then they will doubt their own conclusion. And often that'll manifest as just not doing anything because they can't decide on what to do. They keep on thinking their way into another way of doing it, or maybe they were wrong and doubt the way they were thinking about it. So it's kind of like thinking yourself and doubting yourself in circles. And now the The sexual six is the type of person who you would never think in a million years has fear. That subtype, it uses intimidation. In other words, they face their fear instead of seeing how it is fear that's motivating this need to intimidate. They can often seem like very big, powerful people, even like an 8, except that the 8 is trying to create order out of chaos, whereas the 6 is dealing with their fear in this way. So they can seem intimidating and threatening. Often these are the athletes or the people that are prone towards doing bodybuilding and making their bodies, feeling very strong in their bodies so that they can come across as intimidating people, because they don't want to face and see how this fear is motivating this need to intimidate. And the sexual 6 can be incredibly argumentative. They tend to go against authority. So as where the self-preservation 6 is really following the rules, needing to be accepted by listening and being a good person, the sexual 6 is kind of like the counterphobic, going against the rules, being very contrarian, not agreeing in order to, because they are almost afraid of authority, yet there is a longing for it in some way. Usually that has to do with having a weak kind of father figure. The social 6 is questioning authority, but at the same time, remembering with all 6s, there is a tendency towards loyalty. Because that's why they're called the loyalist. The loyalty will be either towards authority or against authority, depending on the subtype, which is why it can seem a little confusing with 6s. And if you are a 6, I truly suggest you dive into your type. And you have to understand, if you're a 6, that the only way really, I've said it before, but the only way past is through. The minute you see that your mind is just kind of a doubting mind, the fear is there, and you can own the fact that yes, you have anxiety and you have fear. You have to then sense what about yourself doesn't have the anxiety and the fear, and that's your essence. A 6 has to separate themselves from the doubting mind in order to really come to terms with and see that they do not have to be driven by this anxiety all day long. What did I want to say? Oh, the social 6s are often kind of like the kind of people where hierarchy is important to them. They will follow the rules of the hierarchy. In other words, they are hardworking. They will leave their jobs and arrive at the right time. And again, very much a legal mind. Always doubting what they're hearing. They really need the knowledge. They're constantly looking for more information. They find it really difficult, most 6s, to just trust anybody. So often their certainty, their courage, their sense of like that internal I'm okay sense, like that inner security, courage, is in the shadow. So that is why the 6 has to recognize that indeed they have it, it's there, but they have to see how they block it because they are so cynical, and because they naturally are always assuming that something's going to go wrong. And more often than not, whatever you focus on tends to happen. So they often validated for their fearful thoughts and fearful opinions, because they really are presuming and on alert for anything to go wrong at any time, or for someone to cross them in some way. If you're a 6, this is very easy to kind of overcome once you understand it. I work with 6s, and they really are the most logical, wonderful people. I love them because they're real. They're not in the clouds. They're not woo-woo. They're logical. And there's something very special about being just a logical person, especially in the spiritual world, where people tend to jump into a lot of stuff that is unnecessary. It's always right here. Anyway, I like 6s. I love 6s. And if you're a 6, read up about it. Find out about your subtype. You know, often when I work with 6s, they are the least likely to actually dive into the Enneagram again, because they will talk themselves out of it. Don't talk yourself out of it. Do this work. You will really benefit from doing this work. I love you all. The next one I'll be talking about is the Enneagram Type 5. And have the most wonderful weekend in the United States. It is Thanksgiving, and happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners and to all the wonderful students all over the world that we love so dearly. Thank you to all of you, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.